Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting now a little bit late. There are few housekeeping points which I would like to raise. I could see most of the people are not Arabic speakers, so I will speak in English because it will be easier. Number one, please, please, please switch off your telephones, because we are videoing the system and this will interfere with the signaling. So can you please switch off your telephones? The second one is that can you please, when you speak slowly so that the translators can catch up. Number three, for those bilingual, trilingual, please speak in the language that you feel more comfortable with. We have translation in Arabic, English, French, and Spanish, and from one language into the other. The last thing to mention to you is that because the whole thing is being videotaped, the interpreters will try their best to match the sound with the pictures. I'm not going to go on any of the issues or mention anything. I'll leave it to the end. But we have two distinguished speakers who are going to present to us some of the important issues. First, I will introduce Dirk Adriaensen, and I don't think I need to introduce the people to you. You can look at the program. It has the background of the various people and the introduction to why we are having this meeting. You'll find it on page 3 of the brochure which we've given you, which sets out the background why we are having this meeting. I think I will ask Dirk to kick off, because we are going to be strictly adhering to time, because we haven't got time to waste. Thank you very much. It's all yours, Dirk.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be short because we are late already. My aim is to give an overview of what has happened already since 2003. But I would like to start with 1990. On the 6th August 1990, 4 days after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, the UN Security Council imposed a near-total financial and trade embargo on the nation of Iraq that persists in part, including reparations to Kuwait through the present. Operation Desert Storm, the bombing campaign between 17 January 91 and 28 February 91, totally destroyed the civilian infrastructure. More than 1.6 million Iraqi civilians died as a result of the sanctions, including more than 500,000 children. Several UN officials resigned in protest of the devastating UN-imposed sanctions, among them the two distinguished UN Assistant Secretary Generals, Dennis Holliday and Hans von Sponeck. Dennis Holliday resigned in 1998, characterizing the economic sanctions imposed on Iraq as genocide. Mr. Mark Bossait was the first who has presented a groundbreaking working paper, The Adverse Consequences of Economic Sanctions on the Enjoyment of Human Rights, on 21 June 2000 in the UN Subcommission on the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights. All the other UN officials were talking about Saddam Hussein and never talked about the sanctions, as you may remember. Iraqis then were able to restore electricity within 6 months after Operation Desert Storm. The reconstruction campaign following the end of hostilities in March 91 was an achievement of staggering proportion. It was a miracle of organization and solidarity. We should not forget this. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I can tell you it's amazing. It was a miracle. On 19 March 2003, the US, UK and its allies invaded and occupied Iraq. Prior to the invasion, many millions marched in the street worldwide in protest against the imminent invasion. It were the largest demonstration this world has ever seen. Their call went unheeded. In the run-up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, several reasons were given to justify an invasion. However, there were no weapons of mass destruction, be it nuclear, chemical or biological, in contrast to the empty claims of US Secretary of State Colin Powell at the UN Security Council in February 2003, allegations which he afterwards called the lowest point in my life. There was no link whatsoever with Al-Qaeda terrorists. Finally, it was said that the war would bring democracy in Iraq, an example for the entire Middle East. The dictator Saddam Hussein had to be removed. This justification is still given by Tony Blair in the Chilcot inquiry as the main reason for invading Iraq. So there was no smoking gun, no casus belli. This was an illegal war of aggression. There was no approval of the Security Council. The invasion could not be justified by Chapter 7 of the Charter of the UN and qualified as self-defense because Iraq had not attacked the United States and Iraq was no imminent threat. There was no justification for this so-called preemptive or preventive war. Leading international personalities have said so afterwards, like Mr. Kofi Annan, Hans Blix and so on, while they kept silent prior to the invasion. There are many leading scholars who have indeed said the war was illegal, like the report of the Dutch Commission Davids. They concluded that there was no adequate international legal mandate for the invasion of Iraq. And the Prime Minister who ordered this commission, he dismissed the conclusions of that commission. Former Chief Counterterrorism Advisor on the National Security Council, Richard Clarke, believes Bush took office with a predetermined plan to invade Iraq. General Wesley Clark, the former Supreme NATO Allied Commander, recalled a conversation with a military officer in the Pentagon shortly after 9/11 regarding a plan to attack 7 Middle Eastern countries in 5 years. The Brussels Tribunal, that was co-organizer and opening session of the World Tribunal on Iraq, has analyzed the project for the new American century and concluded that the invasion was premeditated, based on lies and illegal. The invasion and subsequent occupation claimed the lives of more than 1.5 million Iraqis and has destroyed the Iraqi nations, its brains, its social fabric, its minorities, everything. All human rights were violated, including the right to life. Baghdad is today still the worst city in the world to live in, according to the latest report. Several attempts have been made to bring the responsible warmongers to court. I give you a few examples. Belgium has changed its law of universal jurisdiction in 2003 under US pressure after an indictment initiated by the Anti-Imperialist League against General Commander of the US Forces, Tommy Franks. In 2005, the Association of Humanitarian Lawyers filed a petition at the Organization of American States against the United States for attacks on hospitals, clinics in Fallujah. In September 2005, a German court declared that the Iraq war violated international law. In November 2006, the Center of Constitutional Rights filed a war crimes complaint against Donald Rumsfeld in Germany. In March 2007, a Spanish judge called for the architects of the Iraq invasions to be tried for war crimes. In October 2007, the International Federation of Human Rights Leagues and the US Center for Constitutional Rights again have filed a lawsuit in France alleging that former US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld allowed torture at US-run detention centers in Iraq and Guantanamo Bay. In October 2009, one day before the abolition of the law of universal jurisdiction in Spain, members of the Brussels Tribunal and US genocide filed a legal case against 4 US presidents and 4 UK Prime Ministers for war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide in Iraq. In November 2011 in Kuala Lumpur, after 2 years of investigation by the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission, a tribunal consisting of 5 judges with judicial and academic backgrounds reached an unanimous verdict that found George W. Bush and Tony Blair guilty of crime against peace, crimes against humanity and genocide as a result of their roles in the Iraq War. Special attention should be given to the weird arguments of the International Criminal Court. The office of the ICC prosecutor had received until 2004 over 240 communications and petitions concerning the situation in Iraq. These communications expressed the concerns of numerous citizens and organizations regarding the launching of military operations and the resulting human loss. Special Prosecutor of the ICC, Moreno Ocampo, issued an amazing statement on 9 February 2006 after what had happened in Fallujah and other cities in Iraq. He waited 2 years to answer to 240 individuals and organizations who filed complaints. And his answer came, as I said, after Fallujah had been bombed to pieces. And I quote, "The office of the prosecutor has received 240 communications. The available information provided no reasonable indicia that coalition forces had intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group as such, as required in the definition of genocide. Similarly, the available information provided no reasonable indicia of the required elements for a crime against humanity." This is a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian populations. The available information did not indicate intentional attacks on a civilian population. After analyzing all the available information, it was concluded that there was no reasonable basis to believe that crimes within the jurisdiction of the court had been committed, namely willful killing and inhumane treatment. The information available at this time supports a reasonable basis for an estimated 4 to 12 victims of willful killing and a limited number of victims of inhuman treatment, totaling in all less than 20 persons. Even where there is a reasonable basis to believe that the crime has been committed, this is not sufficient for the initiation of an investigation by the International Criminal Court. 5 minutes. Okay, I will be very quickly. So the conclusion was, of the International Criminal Court, Moreno Ocampo said, "For the above reasons, in accordance with Article 15 of the Rome Statute, I wish to inform you of my conclusion that at this stage, the statute requirements to seek authorizations to initiate an investigation in the situation in Iraq have not been satisfied. This conclusion can be reconsidered in the light of new facts and evidence. I wish to remind you, in accordance with Rule 49 of the Rules of Procedures and so on, that should you have additional information regarding crimes within the jurisdiction of the court, you may submit it to the office of the prosecutor. Bearing in mind the limited jurisdiction of this court, as well as its complementary nature, effectively functioning national legal systems are in principle the most appropriate and effective forum for addressing allegations of crimes of this nature. These are only a few examples of the legal efforts to hold the war criminals accountable. There are more. I didn't mention them all. So the sentence of Moreno Ocampo, this conclusion can be reconsidered in the light of new facts or evidence. That's precisely why we are gathered here. We need to take a step forward. We have to bundle our efforts. Legal scholars and lawyers have to join hands with the peace movement, which represents the conscience of the world community. One cannot do without the other if we want to achieve positive results. Lawyers and the civil society are natural partners in the struggle of reclaiming international law. And there are several hopeful signs, and just to name a few, we have here also a lawyer from Costa Rica who filed a complaint against the Costa Rican government for joining the war against Iraq, and he was successful, and Costa Rica is the only country that has retrieved its troops due to a decision of the High Court of that country. This is one example, and he will give in 10 minutes a short presentation of that case. The Chilcot inquiry should come up with its conclusions, and hopefully very soon, and Lindsay German will talk about that later. In January 2014, a devastating 250-page dossier detailing allegations of beatings, electrocutions, mock executions and sexual assault was presented to the International Criminal Court and could result in some of Britain's leading defense figures facing prosecution for systematic war crimes. This was done by public interest lawyers and the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights. In 2013, American lawyer Inder Kumar, who is sitting here in the back, who is representing Sundu Shekhar Saleh as plaintiff against official in the former administration of US President George W. Bush, filed a class action lawsuit, Saleh versus Bush, and he will explain this case later also. Justice has to prevail for the sake of our children, for the Iraqi people, and for the sake of the future of mankind. No justice, no peace. During this two-day commission, we will not address the current situation in Iraq. We're here to condemn the original sin, the illegal invasion and occupation in Iraq, and how we can bring the perpetrators to court. And here I finish with my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Dirk. As expected, you have summed up the whole exercise. You've indicated where we are going from here. Now I think we're going to have to listen to the professor who has dealt with quite a lot of international issues. Michael, please, the floor is yours.